Picture Florence in the early 1500s. Political chaos reigns supreme. Families rise and fall with the changing tides of power. Violence erupts in the streets. Alliances shift like sand. In this turbulent world, a young diplomat named Niccolò Machiavelli was watching, learning, and developing principles that would outlast empires. But here's what most people get wrong about Machiavelli. They think he advocated for cruelty and deception as primary tools. The truth is far more sophisticated. Machiavelli's greatest insight wasn't about being ruthless. It was about being strategic. And the cornerstone of his strategy was maintaining absolute emotional control while others around him lost theirs. Consider how Machiavelli handled his own greatest crisis. In 1512, the Medici family returned to power in Florence, and Machiavelli, who had served the previous Republican government, found himself not just unemployed but suspected of conspiracy. He was arrested, tortured, and imprisoned. Lesser men would have broken, would have begged, would have revealed everything they knew to stop the pain. But Machiavelli remained calm. He maintained his composure even under physical duress because he understood something profound about human nature. Panic is contagious, but so is confidence. During his imprisonment, instead of raging against his circumstances or plotting desperate revenge, Machiavelli used his time to observe, to think, and to write. He studied the patterns of power he had witnessed throughout his diplomatic career. He analyzed why some leaders succeeded while others failed spectacularly. What he discovered was that those who maintained their emotional equilibrium during crisis were the ones who ultimately prevailed. This principle of strategic calm wasn't just theoretical for Machiavelli. After his release, he could have remained bitter, could have spent his remaining years in angry exile. Instead, he channeled his experience into writing The Prince, a work that would influence leaders for centuries. He transformed his personal defeat into intellectual victory by refusing to let emotion cloud his judgment. The modern world offers countless examples of this same principle in action. Take Jeff Bezos during Amazon's early years. When the dot-com bubble burst in the early 2000s, Amazon's stock price plummeted by over 90%. Investors panicked. Competitors mocked. The media wrote obituaries for the company. But Bezos remained unnaturally calm. He didn't fire employees in panic. He didn't abandon his long-term vision. He didn't lash out at critics. Instead, he continued executing his strategy with methodical precision. While others were making emotional decisions, selling stocks, firing employees, pivoting desperately, Bezos was making calculated moves. He invested in infrastructure. He improved customer service. He expanded product lines. His calm confidence during the crisis convinced key employees to stay, convinced investors to maintain some faith, and allowed him to acquire distressed competitors at bargain prices. By maintaining his equilibrium when everyone else lost theirs, Bezos positioned Amazon to dominate the recovery that followed. Warren Buffett provides another masterclass in this principle. During the 2008 financial crisis, when banks were collapsing and investors were liquidating everything in panic, Buffett remained remarkably calm. He didn't hold emergency press conferences. He didn't make dramatic announcements. Instead, he quietly began buying stocks in solid companies at unprecedented discounts. His famous quote during this period, "Be fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful," perfectly captures the Machiavellian principle of maintaining strategic calm while others succumb to emotion. But why does this work so effectively? The answer lies in human psychology. When people are emotional, they make predictable mistakes. They overreact to temporary setbacks. They abandon sound strategies for quick fixes. They reveal too much information. They burn bridges they might need later. The person who remains calm can see these patterns clearly and position themselves advantageously. Machiavelli understood that emotion, while natural, is the enemy of strategic thinking. He wrote extensively about how anger, fear, hope, and pride cloud judgment and lead to costly mistakes. He observed that leaders who governed by emotion created instability, while those who maintained their composure could think several moves ahead of their opponents. This principle extends beyond business into every area of life. Consider how the most successful negotiators operate. They never appear desperate, never show anger, never reveal their true timeline or constraints. They maintain pleasant, calm demeanors while gathering information about their counterparts' emotional states and using that intelligence to their advantage. The key insight here is that maintaining calm isn't about suppressing emotions. It's about not allowing emotions to dictate your actions. Machiavelli felt anger, frustration, and disappointment just like anyone else. But he understood that acting on those emotions would compromise his strategic position. Instead, he channeled those feelings into careful analysis and long-term planning. This approach requires tremendous discipline, but it offers extraordinary advantages. When you remain calm while others panic, you appear more competent and trustworthy. People naturally gravitate toward those who seem to have everything under control. You also make better decisions because you can think clearly while your competitors are clouded by emotion. Most importantly, you can observe and understand the true dynamics of any situation because you're not distracted by your own emotional reactions. The foundation of silent power, then, is this ability to maintain strategic calm regardless of external circumstances. It's about developing an inner equilibrium that remains undisturbed by temporary setbacks, provocations, or even genuine crises. This doesn't mean becoming emotionless or indifferent. Rather, it means developing the discipline to pause, analyze, and respond strategically rather than react emotionally. Modern neuroscience confirms what Machiavelli understood intuitively. When we're emotional, our prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain responsible for strategic thinking, becomes less active. Our amygdala, which governs fight-or-flight responses, takes over. This made sense for our ancestors facing immediate physical threats, but it's counterproductive in complex social and business environments where the best response is rarely the fastest one. If you're still here, that means you're serious about understanding these principles and applying them to transform your own life. Comment "strategic mind" below and let me know you're ready to continue this journey of developing the mental discipline that separates those who merely react to circumstances from those who shape them. Because what we've covered so far is just the foundation. The real power comes in learning how to apply these principles in specific situations, which is exactly what we'll explore in the next chapter. The second pillar of Machiavellian power is understanding that victory belongs not to the swift, but to those who move at exactly the right moment. This principle of strategic patience is perhaps the most difficult for people in our instant gratification culture to master, yet it remains one of the most powerful tools for achieving lasting influence and success. Machiavelli learned this lesson through careful observation of successful and failed leaders throughout history. He noticed that those who acted too quickly, even when their intentions were good, often created more problems than they solved. Conversely, those who waited for the optimal moment to act could achieve dramatic results with minimal effort and resistance. Consider how Machiavelli analyzed Caesar's rise to power. Caesar didn't immediately declare himself dictator when he had the military strength to do so. Instead, he carefully cultivated public opinion, gradually expanded his authority through legal means, and only moved decisively when the political climate made his actions appear necessary rather than tyrannical. Caesar understood that premature action, even from a position of strength, could unite his enemies against him. This principle of strategic timing remains as relevant today as it was in ancient Rome. Look at how Apple's Tim Cook has operated since taking over from Steve Jobs. Cook didn't immediately try to prove himself by launching revolutionary new products or making dramatic changes. Instead, he spent years quietly strengthening Apple's supply chain, improving operational efficiency, and building cash reserves. Only when he had established his credibility and created optimal conditions did he begin making bold moves like the Apple Watch and services expansion. The power of strategic patience becomes even more apparent when we examine how it's used to defeat opponents. Machiavelli understood that direct confrontation often strengthens enemies by giving them a clear target and justification for their actions. Instead, he advocated for a more subtle approach, allowing opponents to defeat themselves through their own impatience and emotional reactions. One of the most striking modern examples of this principle comes from the business world through the story of Reed Hastings and Netflix. When Blockbuster dominated the video rental market, Netflix was a small startup with a seemingly inferior product, DVDs by mail that took days to arrive versus instant gratification at Blockbuster stores. Many entrepreneurs would have tried to compete directly, perhaps by opening physical stores or developing flashier marketing campaigns. Instead, Hastings demonstrated extraordinary strategic patience. He understood that the real battle wasn't about current convenience. It was about future technology trends. While Blockbuster focused on maximizing short-term profits from late fees and store operations, Hastings quietly built a different kind of company. He invested in recommendation algorithms, developed a subscription model that eliminated late fees, and most importantly, began preparing for streaming technology that didn't yet exist for consumers. Hastings allowed Blockbuster to remain comfortable in their dominance, while he positioned Netflix for a future that only he could see clearly. He didn't attack Blockbuster's strengths. Instead, he made their strengths irrelevant. When streaming technology finally matured, Netflix was ready to pivot immediately, while Blockbuster's massive infrastructure of physical stores became a liability rather than an asset. The beauty of this approach is that Blockbuster never saw Netflix as a serious threat until it was too late. By the time Blockbuster realized the landscape was changing, Netflix had already established the technological infrastructure, content relationships, and customer base necessary to dominate the new paradigm. Hastings defeated a much larger opponent not through direct confrontation, but through strategic patience and superior positioning. This principle applies equally to personal relationships and career advancement. Consider how the most successful people navigate office politics. They don't immediately challenge difficult colleagues or push for rapid promotions. Instead, they quietly build alliances, demonstrate competence, and wait for the right opportunities to advance their positions. Take the example of Oprah Winfrey's rise to media dominance. When she started in television, the industry was dominated by white male hosts and executives who controlled every major platform. Oprah could have tried to break down these barriers through direct confrontation or by demanding immediate changes. Instead, she demonstrated strategic patience that would have impressed Machiavelli himself. Oprah focused on perfecting her craft while working within the existing system. She built genuine relationships with audiences by being authentically herself rather than trying to imitate established hosts. She proved her value through ratings and revenue rather than through arguments about fairness or representation. Only when she had established her indispensable worth did she begin negotiating for greater control and eventually ownership of her content. By the time Oprah launched her own network, she had already spent decades building the credibility, relationships, and financial resources necessary to succeed. She had allowed the industry's initial skepticism to transform into respect and partnership. Her patience had converted potential opponents into allies who now had vested interests in her success. The strategic patience principle also involves understanding that some battles aren't worth fighting, even if you could win them. Machiavelli wrote extensively about the importance of conserving energy and resources for truly important conflicts. He observed that leaders who exhausted themselves fighting every small challenge lacked the strength to handle major crises when they arose. Warren Buffett exemplifies this principle through his famous too hard pile, investment opportunities that he simply chooses not to pursue, even when they might be profitable. Buffett understands that trying to capitalize on every possible opportunity would prevent him from focusing his time and energy on the truly exceptional investments that create long-term wealth. His strategic patience in waiting for perfect opportunities has generated returns that far exceed what he could have achieved through constant activity. This discipline of strategic inaction is perhaps even more difficult than strategic action. It requires tremendous confidence to pass up immediate opportunities in favor of better ones that may not appear for months or years. It demands the wisdom to distinguish between genuine opportunities and distractions disguised as opportunities. The modern world's constant connectivity and information flow make strategic patience more challenging but also more powerful. While others react immediately to every news event, market fluctuation, or social media trend, those who maintain strategic patience can see through the noise to identify what truly matters. They can distinguish between temporary disruptions and permanent changes, between genuine opportunities and mere hype. Consider how Jeff Bezos approached Amazon's expansion beyond books. Many critics and investors pressured him to move faster, to capture more market share more quickly. Instead, Bezos demonstrated remarkable patience, expanding methodically from books to music to electronics, learning from each category before moving to the next. This approach allowed Amazon to build sustainable competitive advantages rather than just grabbing temporary market share. The key to developing strategic patience lies in understanding that time can be your greatest ally if you use it wisely. While others are reacting to current events, you can be positioning yourself for future developments. While others are exhausting themselves fighting today's battles, you can be preparing for tomorrow's opportunities. This doesn't mean being passive or indecisive. Strategic patience requires constant preparation, continuous learning, and careful observation. You're not waiting for perfect conditions. You're creating them through patient, deliberate action. You're not avoiding competition. You're choosing the time and place where your advantages will be greatest. The most successful application of strategic patience involves understanding your opponent's psychological patterns. Machiavelli observed that impatient people become predictable over time. They have habitual responses to pressure, consistent ways of making decisions under stress, and recurring patterns of behavior when they feel threatened. By maintaining your own patience while carefully observing these patterns, you can begin to anticipate your opponent's moves before they make them. You can position yourself to benefit from their predictable reactions. Most importantly, you can wait for them to make the inevitable mistakes that impatient people always make under pressure. Strategic patience is ultimately about understanding that real power isn't about winning every battle. It's about winning the war. And wars are won by those who can think strategically while their opponents react emotionally, who can wait for optimal conditions while their enemies exhaust themselves fighting in unfavorable circumstances, and who can maintain their long-term vision while others get distracted by short-term concerns. If you're still following along, that means you understand the profound difference between reacting to events and strategically shaping them. Comment "patient strategist" below to let me know you're developing the mental discipline necessary to wait for your optimal moments while others burn themselves out through constant, unfocused activity. The third pillar of Machiavellian strategy reveals one of the most counterintuitive truths about power. Silence is often more powerful than speech. In our culture that celebrates those who speak loudest and most frequently, the strategic use of silence has become a rare and therefore extremely potent tool. Machiavelli understood that words, once spoken, cannot be taken back, and that people reveal far more about themselves when they're trying to fill uncomfortable silences than they ever do when you're talking. Machiavelli's own diplomatic career provided countless examples of silence as a strategic weapon. When representing Florence in negotiations with more powerful states, he often found himself in situations where speaking too much would reveal Florence's weaknesses or desperate position. Instead, he developed the art of strategic silence, allowing others to talk while he listened, observed, and gathered intelligence that he could use later. During his negotiations with Cesare Borgia, one of the most powerful and dangerous men of his era, Machiavelli discovered that silence could be more intimidating than threats. When Borgia would make demands or issue ultimatums, Machiavelli wouldn't immediately respond. He would pause, appear to consider deeply, and often respond with questions rather than statements. This approach made him appear more thoughtful and competent than diplomats who rushed to fill every silence with nervous chatter. The psychological power of strategic silence operates on multiple levels. First, it creates discomfort in others, and people instinctively try to relieve this discomfort by talking more, often revealing information they hadn't intended to share. Second, it makes you appear more thoughtful and deliberate, qualities that naturally command respect. Third, it forces others to make assumptions about your thoughts and intentions, and these assumptions are often more favorable than reality. Modern business leaders have elevated this principle to an art form. Consider how Steve Jobs used silence during product presentations. Jobs would often pause for several seconds after making important announcements, allowing the weight of his words to sink in while audiences sat in anticipation. These pauses weren't hesitation. They were calculated moments that amplified the impact of his message. The silence itself became part of the communication, creating emphasis more powerful than any words could achieve. The most successful negotiators understand that silence can be their most powerful tool. When someone makes an offer, the natural tendency is to respond immediately, either accepting or making a counteroffer. But experienced negotiators know that remaining silent after an initial offer often prompts the other party to improve their terms without any additional pressure. The silence itself communicates dissatisfaction more effectively than complaints or arguments ever could. Elon Musk has demonstrated masterful use of strategic silence throughout his career. When faced with criticism or attacks from competitors, media, or government officials, Musk often chooses not to respond immediately. This silence serves multiple purposes. It prevents him from making emotional statements he might regret later. It forces his critics to escalate their attacks until they often appear unreasonable, and it allows him to craft more strategic responses when he does choose to speak. The power of calculated silence becomes even more apparent in personal relationships and social situations. People who talk constantly are rarely seen as mysterious or intriguing. They reveal too much about themselves, leaving little for others to discover. Conversely, those who speak thoughtfully and use silence strategically maintain an aura of depth and complexity that naturally attracts others. Warren Buffett exemplifies this principle in his approach to media relations. While other billionaires frequently give interviews, make public statements, and engage in social media debates, Buffett carefully controls his public communication. He speaks primarily through his annual shareholder letters and his company's annual meeting. This scarcity makes his words more valuable and ensures that when he does speak, people listen carefully. The strategic use of silence also prevents you from making the mistakes that verbose people inevitably make. Every word you speak provides information to others about your thoughts, intentions, plans, and weaknesses. Every opinion you express publicly can potentially be used against you later. Every argument you engage in risks creating enemies or revealing your own limitations. Machiavelli observed that powerful people throughout history shared a common trait. They were careful with their words. They understood that speaking too much, too often, or too carelessly could undermine their authority and provide ammunition to their enemies. They also understood that silence could create an impression of wisdom and depth that constant talking could never achieve. In the modern corporate world, this principle manifests in various ways. The most successful executives rarely engage in public feuds with competitors, even when attacked directly. They understand that responding to every criticism or provocation diminishes their stature and distracts from their strategic objectives. Instead, they let their results speak for them while maintaining dignified silence about their critics. Jeff Bezos demonstrated this principle when Amazon was repeatedly attacked by competitors and critics during its early years. Rather than engaging in public debates about Amazon's business model or defending every decision, Bezos remained largely silent about his critics while focusing intensely on execution. This approach prevented him from being drawn into distracting arguments while allowing Amazon's performance to gradually silence its detractors. The power of silence extends beyond external communication to internal decision-making processes. The most successful leaders often use silence strategically in meetings and discussions. When team members present ideas or proposals, these leaders don't immediately offer their opinions. Instead, they ask questions, encourage further discussion, and allow others to reveal their true thoughts and motivations before committing to any position. This approach serves multiple purposes. It prevents the leader's initial opinion from shutting down creative thinking among team members. It allows the leader to gather more complete information before making decisions. It encourages team members to think more deeply about their proposals, knowing they won't receive immediate validation or rejection. Most importantly, it often reveals hidden agendas, potential problems, or alternative solutions that wouldn't emerge if the leader dominated the conversation. The discipline required to maintain strategic silence is substantial. Human beings are naturally social creatures who feel compelled to fill silences with words. We're uncomfortable with pauses in conversation and often interpret silence as rejection or disinterest. Overcoming these natural tendencies requires practice and tremendous self-control. However, the rewards for developing this discipline are extraordinary. Strategic silence gives you time to think before responding, reducing the likelihood of saying something you'll regret later. It encourages others to reveal more about themselves and their intentions. It creates an impression of wisdom and thoughtfulness that verbose people can never achieve. Most importantly, It allows you to control the flow and direction of conversations rather than simply reacting to what others say. The key to using silence effectively is understanding when and how to employ it. Silence during negotiations can prompt better offers. Silence after making important statements can amplify their impact. Silence when others are emotional can prevent you from being drawn into unproductive conflicts. Silence when you don't have complete information can prevent you from making premature commitments. Modern technology has made strategic silence both more challenging and more powerful. Social media platforms encourage constant communication and immediate responses to every event or controversy. Those who resist this pressure and maintain strategic silence stand out dramatically from the noise. Their occasional communications carry much more weight because they're not competing with their own constant chatter. The most sophisticated application of strategic silence involves using it to manipulate the behavior of others. When you remain silent about your intentions, others are forced to make assumptions. These assumptions often reveal their own plans and priorities. By carefully observing how people respond to your silence, you can gather valuable intelligence about their thoughts, fears, and strategic positions. Strategic silence also prevents you from providing free information to competitors or opponents. Every time you speak publicly about your plans, challenges, or thinking processes, you're giving away intelligence that could be used against you. Silence forces others to spend time and resources trying to understand your position instead of allowing them to focus entirely on their own strategies. The ultimate power of calculated silence lies in its scarcity. In a world where everyone is talking, those who speak thoughtfully and sparingly command attention and respect. Their words carry more weight because they're not diluted by constant chatter. Their silence itself becomes a form of communication, often more powerful than anything they could say. Chapter 4. The Intelligence Network, Gathering Information While Revealing Nothing. The fourth pillar of Machiavellian power centers on information asymmetry, knowing more about others than they know about you. Machiavelli understood that information is the ultimate currency of power, and that those who can gather intelligence while protecting their own secrets hold decisive advantages in any conflict or negotiation. This principle has become even more critical in our information age, where data and intelligence can determine the outcome of business battles, political campaigns, and personal relationships. During his diplomatic career, Machiavelli developed sophisticated networks of informants throughout Italy. He understood that official diplomatic meetings rarely revealed the true intentions of other states. The real intelligence came from understanding the personal motivations of leaders, the internal political pressures they faced, and the private conversations they had when they thought no one was listening. Machiavelli cultivated relationships with servants, merchants, minor officials, and other people who had access to information but weren't considered threats by those in power. His approach to intelligence gathering was remarkably modern. He didn't rely solely on spies or paid informants. Instead, he created a web of relationships where information flowed naturally through seemingly casual conversations. He would share carefully selected, non-sensitive information with certain contacts, which encouraged them to reciprocate with more valuable intelligence. He understood that the best intelligence comes from people who don't realize they're providing it. This principle translates directly to modern business and personal relationships. The most successful entrepreneurs, executives, and investors all maintain extensive networks of contacts who provide them with early warnings about market changes, competitor strategies, and emerging opportunities. They don't approach this systematically like Machiavelli's diplomatic intelligence network, but the underlying principles remain identical. Consider how successful venture capitalists operate. Firms like Sequoia Capital and Andreessen Horowitz don't just evaluate startup pitches in isolation. They maintain relationships with thousands of entrepreneurs, executives, engineers, and industry experts who provide them with constant streams of information about technological trends, market developments, and the true performance of companies they're considering investing in. This intelligence network allows them to make investment decisions based on far more complete information than individual entrepreneurs or smaller investors can access. The key insight here is that information gathering works best when it doesn't appear to be information gathering. People are naturally suspicious of direct questions about sensitive topics, but they freely share the same information in casual conversations with people they trust. The most effective intelligence gathering happens through genuine relationship building rather than interrogation. Jeff Bezos built Amazon's competitive advantages partly through superior intelligence gathering. Amazon maintains relationships with suppliers, competitors, customers, and industry experts that provide early warnings about market changes and competitive threats. Amazon's famous customer obsession isn't just about service. It's also an intelligence gathering mechanism that provides constant feedback about market needs and competitor weaknesses. But intelligence gathering is only half of the equation. The other half is protecting your own sensitive information while gathering intelligence from others. Machiavelli was masterful at this aspect of the game. In diplomatic negotiations, he would encourage other diplomats to reveal their positions and constraints while carefully controlling what information he shared about Florence's situation. Modern business leaders who understand this principle never reveal their full strategic thinking in public. They may share general direction or broad goals, but they protect specific tactical information, timing details, and potential vulnerabilities. They understand that every piece of information they reveal publicly becomes available to competitors who can use it against them. Warren Buffett demonstrates this principle through his annual shareholder letters. While these letters appear to provide extensive information about Berkshire Hathaway's thinking and strategy, they actually reveal very little about specific investment decisions, timing, or internal processes. Buffett shares his general philosophy and broad observations about markets, but he carefully protects the detailed analysis and decision-making processes that generate Berkshire's superior returns. The most sophisticated practitioners of this principle understand that information has different values to different people. A piece of information that seems trivial to you might be extremely valuable to someone else, while information that others consider insignificant might be crucial for your decision-making. This creates opportunities for mutually beneficial information exchanges where both parties feel they're getting the better deal. Successful negotiators routinely use this principle. Before entering important negotiations, they gather as much information as possible about the other party's situation, constraints, alternatives, and true priorities. They learn about the personal motivations of individual decision-makers, the internal politics of organizations they're dealing with, and the external pressures that might influence their counterparts' behavior. Elon Musk has built multiple companies partly through superior intelligence gathering about technological trends and market opportunities. Before starting Tesla, Musk spent considerable time learning about battery technology, automotive manufacturing, and regulatory environments. He identified opportunities that established automakers had overlooked not because he was smarter, but because he gathered information from different sources and saw patterns they missed. The modern technology industry provides countless examples of companies that succeeded through superior intelligence gathering. Google's early success came partly from better understanding of how people actually search for information online. Facebook's growth was fueled by superior intelligence about how people wanted to connect and share with others. These companies didn't just develop better technology, they developed better understanding of human behavior and market needs. The intelligence gathering principle also applies to personal career advancement. The most successful professionals maintain relationships throughout their industries that provide early warnings about job opportunities, company changes, and market trends. They understand which skills are becoming more valuable, which companies are growing or declining, and which leaders are gaining or losing influence. This doesn't require formal networking events or aggressive relationship building. The most effective intelligence gathering happens through genuine professional relationships built over time. People naturally share information with colleagues they trust and respect. The key is maintaining these relationships consistently rather than only reaching out when you need something. The protective aspect of this principle is equally important. In professional settings, being too transparent about your plans, concerns, or strategic thinking can create vulnerabilities that others can exploit. The most successful people share enough information to maintain relationships and demonstrate competence, but they protect sensitive details that could be used against them. Social media has made this balance more challenging, but also more important. Platforms like LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram encourage constant sharing of personal and professional information. Those who understand Machiavellian principles use these platforms strategically, sharing content that builds their reputation and relationships while carefully protecting sensitive information about their true plans and constraints. The intelligence network principle extends beyond gathering information about competitors or opportunities to understanding the people you work with most closely. The most successful leaders maintain awareness of their team members' motivations, concerns, career aspirations, and personal situations. This intelligence allows them to make better decisions about assignments, compensation, and organizational changes. But this must be done carefully and ethically. There's a significant difference between maintaining awareness of your team's professional development needs and invasively monitoring their personal lives. The goal is to become a better leader who can support team members more effectively, not to manipulate or control them. The ultimate application of this principle involves creating systems that gather intelligence automatically rather than requiring constant active effort. Successful businesses build relationships and processes that provide continuous streams of relevant information. They create feedback loops that alert them to important changes before these changes become obvious to competitors. Amazon's recommendation system is partly an intelligence-gathering mechanism that provides constant feedback about customer preferences and market trends. Google's search algorithms gather intelligence about human behavior and information needs on a massive scale. These systems don't just serve customers. They also provide competitive intelligence that helps these companies stay ahead of market changes. The key to building effective intelligence networks lies in understanding that information sharing must be reciprocal to be sustainable. People who only extract information without providing value in return quickly find their access to intelligence limited. The most effective approach involves sharing non-sensitive information that helps others while protecting your most crucial secrets. This creates a careful balancing act. You need to provide enough value to maintain relationships and encourage information sharing, but not so much that you compromise your competitive advantages. You need to ask enough questions to gather useful intelligence, but not so many that people become suspicious of your motives. The sophistication required to execute this principle effectively shouldn't be underestimated. It requires excellent judgment about what information to share with whom, exceptional memory for details that others might find insignificant, and the analytical ability to connect seemingly unrelated pieces of information into useful intelligence. However, for those who develop these capabilities, the advantages are substantial. Superior information allows for better decision-making, earlier identification of opportunities and threats, and more effective strategies for achieving objectives. In competitive situations, better intelligence often determines who wins and who loses. Chapter 5. The Art of Strategic Positioning, Making Others Come to You. The final pillar of Machiavellian power represents perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of strategic thinking, the ability to position yourself so advantageously that others have no choice but to come to you on your terms. This principle transforms you from someone who chases opportunities into someone who creates them, from someone who reacts to circumstances into someone who shapes them. Machiavelli understood that the ultimate expression of power is not having to use it directly, but creating conditions where others naturally align with your interests. Throughout his diplomatic career, Machiavelli observed that the most successful rulers weren't necessarily the ones with the largest armies or the most wealth. They were the ones who could make their territories essential to others through strategic trade routes, crucial alliances, or unique resources that others needed. These rulers rarely had to threaten or cajole because others naturally sought their cooperation. Florence itself provided Machiavelli with an excellent case study in strategic positioning. Despite being smaller and less militarily powerful than many surrounding states, Florence maintained its independence through strategic positioning. The city controlled crucial trade routes between northern and southern Europe. It developed banking relationships that made it indispensable to larger powers who needed financing for their military campaigns. Florence didn't compete directly with more powerful states. It made itself valuable to them. This principle operates at every level of human interaction, from personal relationships to global business strategy. The most successful people and organizations consistently position themselves as valuable resources rather than supplicants. They create situations where others seek them out rather than constantly pursuing opportunities themselves. Consider how Apple achieved this positioning in the technology industry. Instead of competing directly with existing computer companies by offering similar products at lower prices, Apple created an entirely different category of computing experience. They made their products so distinctively appealing that customers were willing to pay premium prices and wait in long lines for new releases. Apple didn't chase market share. They created a market that came to them. Steve Jobs understood the psychological power of making people want what you have rather than trying to convince them to buy what you're selling. Apple stores were designed to feel like exclusive spaces where customers were privileged to experience Apple's products. Product launches became events where media and customers competed for access. Even Apple's pricing strategy reinforced this positioning. High prices suggested premium quality and exclusivity rather than accessibility. The beauty of strategic positioning is that it creates sustainable competitive advantages. When others come to you, you control the terms of engagement. You can be selective about which opportunities to pursue. You can command premium pricing because alternatives aren't readily available. Most importantly, you conserve energy and resources because you're not constantly chasing after opportunities that may not materialize. Warren Buffett has elevated strategic positioning to an art form through his approach to investing. Berkshire Hathaway doesn't pitch investment opportunities to companies. Instead, Buffett has positioned himself and his company so attractively that business owners approach him when they want to sell their companies. They come to Buffett because he offers something unique: the ability to sell their life's work to someone who will preserve their company's culture and legacy while providing fair financial terms. This positioning didn't happen overnight. Buffett spent decades building a reputation for fair dealing, long-term thinking, and respect for the companies he acquires. He created a track record that made him the preferred buyer for a specific type of business owner. Now, instead of competing in auctions with other investors, Buffett often receives exclusive opportunities to acquire exceptional companies at reasonable prices. The principle extends to personal career development as well. The most successful professionals don't constantly apply for new positions or chase after promotions. Instead, they position themselves as indispensable resources within their organizations and valuable assets within their industries. They develop unique combinations of skills, relationships, and knowledge that make them the obvious choice when opportunities arise. Oprah Winfrey's rise to media dominance illustrates this principle perfectly. Rather than aggressively pursuing every available opportunity in television, Oprah focused on becoming exceptionally good at connecting with audiences in a way that no other host could replicate. She didn't try to imitate successful male hosts or conform to existing television formats. Instead, she created her own approach that was so distinctive and effective that networks, advertisers, and audiences naturally gravitated toward her. By the time Oprah was ready to launch her own network, she didn't need to convince investors or partners of her value. Her track record spoke for itself, and major media companies competed for the opportunity to work with her. She had positioned herself so advantageously that others came to her with proposals and partnerships rather than her having to seek them out. The key to effective strategic positioning lies in understanding what others truly need versus what they say they want. Markets are full of companies offering what customers claim to want, but few organizations truly understand the deeper needs that customers themselves might not fully recognize. Those who can identify and fulfill these unspoken needs create positioning so powerful that customers seek them out specifically. Amazon's positioning strategy demonstrates this principle on a massive scale. Jeff Bezos understood that customers didn't just want low prices, they wanted convenience, selection, and reliability. While other retailers focused primarily on price competition, Amazon built infrastructure and systems that made shopping easier and more predictable than any alternative. They positioned themselves not just as a store, but as an essential service that customers couldn't easily replace. This positioning allowed Amazon to expand into new categories and services because customers already trusted them to deliver value consistently. Amazon didn't have to convince customers to try their cloud computing services or their streaming video platform. Their positioning in retail created credibility that transferred to new ventures. The psychological aspects of strategic positioning are crucial to understand. When people come to you rather than you approaching them, the entire dynamic of the relationship changes. They perceive you as more valuable because you're clearly in demand. They assume you have alternatives, which makes them more willing to accept your terms. Most importantly, They feel like they're getting access to something exclusive rather than being sold something common. Reed Hastings leveraged this psychology brilliantly when positioning Netflix in the entertainment industry. Rather than trying to compete directly with traditional television networks by creating similar content, Netflix positioned itself as the platform where the most innovative and creative content would emerge. They attracted top talent by offering creative freedom that traditional networks couldn't match. Soon, directors, writers, and actors were approaching Netflix with projects rather than Netflix having to chase after established entertainment industry players. The strategic positioning principle also requires understanding timing and patience. You can't force others to come to you. You have to create conditions that naturally lead to this outcome over time. This means making investments and building capabilities before you need them, developing relationships before you require them, and establishing credibility before you want to leverage it. Elon Musk's approach to building Tesla demonstrates sophisticated strategic positioning across multiple dimensions. Instead of positioning Tesla as just another car company, Musk positioned it as a technology company that happened to make cars. This attracted different types of employees, investors, and customers than traditional automotive companies could access. Tesla's positioning also allowed them to command premium prices and generate intense customer loyalty that traditional automakers struggle to achieve. Musk further strengthened this positioning by making Tesla's patents available to competitors, a move that seemed counterintuitive but actually reinforced Tesla's position as the innovation leader in electric vehicles. By appearing confident enough to share their technology, Tesla positioned themselves as so far ahead that they could afford to help competitors catch up. The most sophisticated application of strategic positioning involves creating what economists call network effects, situations where your value increases as more people interact with you. Social media platforms like Facebook and LinkedIn demonstrate this principle clearly. The more people who join these platforms, the more valuable they become to each individual user, which makes it increasingly difficult for competitors to attract users away. Microsoft achieved similar positioning in business software through their Office suite. As more businesses adopted Office, it became the standard for document sharing and collaboration, which made it increasingly difficult for competitors to gain traction regardless of the quality of their products. Microsoft's positioning created a self-reinforcing cycle where their dominance attracted more users, which strengthened their dominance. Personal strategic positioning often involves becoming the go-to person for specific types of problems or opportunities within your industry or organization. This requires developing deep expertise in areas that others find difficult or boring, building relationships with key decision-makers, and consistently delivering results that exceed expectations. The most successful consultants, lawyers, doctors, and other professionals all understand this principle. They don't compete primarily on price or availability. Instead, they position themselves as the obvious choice for specific types of challenging situations. When organizations face these situations, they naturally think of these professionals first. Strategic positioning also involves understanding what not to do. Every opportunity you pursue, every client you accept, and every project you take on affects your positioning. Taking on work that doesn't align with your desired positioning can dilute your brand and confuse the market about what you represent. The most successful people are often more selective about what they refuse than what they accept. This selectivity itself becomes part of their positioning. When people know that you turn down most opportunities, the opportunities you do accept appear more valuable. When customers know that you don't work with everyone, they feel more privileged to work with you. The digital age has made strategic positioning both more challenging and more powerful. Social media and online platforms make it easier for people to discover you, but they also create more competition for attention. Those who understand how to use digital tools strategically can build positioning that would have been impossible in previous eras. Personal branding through content creation, thought leadership, and strategic social media presence allows individuals to position themselves advantageously within their industries. However, this requires the same strategic thinking that Machiavelli applied to diplomacy, understanding your audience, controlling your message, and consistently reinforcing your desired positioning through every interaction. The ultimate goal of strategic positioning is to create what Machiavelli would have recognized as the ideal power dynamic. others competing for your attention and cooperation rather than you competing for theirs. This doesn't happen through manipulation or deception, but through genuinely creating unique value that others cannot easily replicate or replace. When you achieve effective strategic positioning, several things happen simultaneously. People perceive you as more successful and competent because you're clearly in demand. You have more control over your time and energy because you can be selective about opportunities. You can command premium pricing or compensation because alternatives to you aren't readily available. Most importantly, you can focus on doing your best work rather than constantly marketing yourself because your reputation attracts opportunities naturally. The key insight that connects all 5 pillars of Machiavellian power is that true influence operates through understanding human psychology rather than through force or manipulation. When you maintain strategic calm, others naturally trust your judgment. When you demonstrate strategic patience, others perceive you as wise and thoughtful. When you use silence strategically, others fill the space with information you can use. When you gather intelligence while protecting your own secrets, you can make better decisions than competitors. When you position yourself strategically, others naturally seek you out. These principles work because they align with fundamental aspects of human nature that haven't changed since Machiavelli's time. People are drawn to those who appear calm and confident during crises. They trust those who think carefully before acting. They respect those who speak thoughtfully rather than constantly. They value those who understand their needs and situations. They seek out those who offer something they cannot easily obtain elsewhere. The modern world offers unprecedented opportunities to apply these principles. Global communication allows you to build relationships and gather intelligence across vast distances. Digital platforms enable strategic positioning that can reach millions of people. Information technology provides tools for analysis and decision-making that Machiavelli could never have imagined. However, the fundamental principles remain unchanged because human nature remains unchanged. Those who understand and apply these principles in our modern context can achieve levels of influence and success that would have impressed even the master strategist himself. The choice before you is simple but profound. You can continue reacting emotionally to circumstances, speaking without thinking, competing directly with others, and chasing after opportunities that may never materialize. Or you can begin developing the strategic discipline that has allowed the most successful people throughout history to shape their world rather than merely respond to it. The 5 pillars we've explored, strategic calm, strategic patience, calculated silence, intelligence gathering, and strategic positioning, form a complete system for developing authentic power and influence. They work synergistically, with each principle reinforcing the others to create advantages that compound over time. But understanding these principles intellectually is only the beginning. True mastery comes through consistent application, careful observation of results, and continuous refinement of your approach. The most successful practitioners spend years developing these capabilities, treating them as skills that require practice rather than techniques that can be applied casually. The modern world desperately needs people who understand these principles. In an era of emotional reactivity, strategic calmness stands out dramatically. In a culture of instant gratification, strategic patience creates enormous advantages. In an environment of constant chatter, thoughtful silence commands attention and respect. In an age of information overload, those who can gather and analyze intelligence effectively make better decisions. In a competitive marketplace, strategic positioning creates sustainable differentiation. These are not just business principles or political strategies. They are life skills that can transform every aspect of your personal and professional relationships. They can help you navigate family dynamics, advance your career, build wealth, develop meaningful relationships, and create the life you truly want rather than simply accepting whatever circumstances present to you. The question is not whether these principles work. Centuries of evidence from the most successful people in history prove their effectiveness. The question is whether you have the discipline and patience to develop these capabilities within yourself. The journey requires time, practice, and the willingness to think strategically even when others around you are reacting emotionally. But for those who commit to this path, the rewards extend far beyond material success. You develop genuine confidence that comes from knowing you can handle whatever challenges arise. You create relationships based on mutual respect rather than manipulation or desperation. You build a reputation that opens doors without you having to ask. Most importantly, you develop the ability to shape your circumstances rather than merely responding to them. The principles Machiavelli observed in Renaissance Italy remain as relevant today as they were 5 centuries ago because they're based on unchanging aspects of human nature. Power, influence, and success still flow to those who understand these deeper patterns of human behavior and can apply them with wisdom and integrity. If you've stayed with this entire journey, that means you possess the intellectual curiosity and strategic thinking that separates those who achieve exceptional results from those who remain trapped in patterns of emotional reactivity and short-term thinking. Comment Master Strategist below to let me know you're committed to developing these timeless principles of power and influence that can transform not just your own life, but your ability to positively impact everyone around you. The silent path to power is not about domination or manipulation. It's about developing the wisdom and discipline to influence circumstances and relationships in ways that benefit everyone involved. It's about becoming the type of person that others naturally want to follow, support, and cooperate with. It's about achieving your goals not by forcing outcomes, but by creating conditions where the outcomes you desire naturally emerge. This is the true legacy of Machiavelli's insights, not the crude interpretation of the ends justify the means, but the sophisticated understanding that lasting power comes from mastering yourself first, and then using that mastery to create value for others while achieving your own objectives. The world needs more people who understand these principles and can apply them with wisdom, integrity, and genuine concern for the greater good. Your journey toward mastering these timeless principles of strategic thinking and authentic influence begins now. The question is, are you ready to commit to the disciplined practice required to transform these insights into capabilities that will serve you throughout your life?